Hi, I'm Nomi. They said I embarrassed them, right as my father kicked my wheelchair in front of hundreds of people during my graduation. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was everything that came before. The forged documents, the stolen savings, the time my own mother drugged my cake just so I wouldn't speak at a family dinner. They said I was dramatic. They said I was ungrateful. But what do you do when your own family rewrites your life and sells it for sympathy? And if I told you, I bought back the house they tried to die in, just to change the locks, would you still call me cruel? Or would you finally call it justice? I had pictured this day in so many versions over the years that I lost count. Some versions had music swelling and people clapping as I rolled across the stage, proud and a little emotional. Some had my family in the front row, eyes filled with something close to admiration. Even the most modest version had me just making it through without shame. But none of them looked like what actually happened. I sat behind the heavy velvet curtain, my hands trembling on the rim of my wheelchair, feeling the sweat behind my neck soak through the collar of my navy dress. I could hear the rustle of the crowd outside, the clatter of programs, and someone calling out names from the list of graduates. I had worked 4 years straight, taking online classes when I was stuck in bed post-surgery, pushing through night courses in community college until I earned that transfer. I kept my head down, paid my own way as best I could, and stayed quiet even when it hurt. This degree wasn't just a paper, it was everything I had rebuilt after everything they'd broken. Next up, with honors, Nomi Rilke. I took a breath. I rolled forward. From the edge of the stage, I could see the silhouettes of the crowd rising in applause. My wheels creaked softly. Just as I cleared the curtain, I caught the outline of my father's face in the front row, taut and red. Then I heard it. "You shamed this family!" I barely turned before his foot connected with the side of my wheelchair. The force wasn't enough to knock me over, but enough to twist me sideways. I jolted, the chair wobbling under me. My diploma slipped from my lap. A thick, stunned silence fell over the auditorium. I blinked. The spotlight burned into my retinas, and in its glare, I could see the confusion on people's faces. Then, the whispers started. Did he just... Was that her dad? He kicked her wheelchair! I could feel my father walking toward the stage. My heart thudded like it wanted to crawl into my throat. He climbed 2 steps and stood next to me. He leaned toward the microphone. I won't sit here and clap while my daughter rolls up like some charity case pretending to be something she's not. A few gasps. A woman in the back called out, "Get him off the stage!" But nobody moved. I stared straight ahead. My lips parted, but nothing came out. My voice had abandoned me the way they always had. The dean stepped back, unsure whether to intervene, and just like that, the moment I'd worked for all those years was no longer mine. The security guards moved in too late. My father had already turned his back to the crowd, walking off stage like he'd made his point. And maybe he had, to them. I bent slowly and picked up my diploma. I held it tightly in my lap, the way I once held myself together as a little girl when I got scolded for crying. I smiled, not because I was proud, because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I rolled forward again and took my place in the line, nodding as the assistant handed me the tassel. My hands were shaking, but my spine stayed straight. I didn't look back at the audience. I didn't need to. I could still hear Vera's voice in my head. "You embarrassed him. Why couldn't you just act normal for once?" It wasn't new. They had found ways to control me with words for years. This time, it was just louder. Backstage, 2 faculty members hovered near me. One reached out gently to touch my arm. "I am so sorry," she said softly. I nodded. "Don't be. He's always been like that. He just never had a mic before." She looked startled, but didn't press further. I maneuvered past them and out the side door, into the parking lot. The sunlight was too bright for my eyes. It wasn't even noon yet. I wheeled myself to my car, an old Toyota, barely holding together, but mine. I sat there a moment, looking at the flyer tucked in my glove box. It was still sealed, the trust documents my grandfather had given me when I was 23. I hadn't opened them since. I hadn't needed to. Until now. I broke the seal and opened the folder. The legal jargon blurred for a moment, then settled. I remembered him. Granddad never said much, but he'd been there. Quietly, even when my parents didn't show up for my surgeries or forgot my birthday. He showed up with soup and crossword puzzles. And once, this envelope. Just in case, he had said. They wanted to shame me. That was their currency. It had always worked. But not this time. I started the car, still shaking. Not from fear, not anymore. Something else had taken its place. Clarity. They want shame? I whispered aloud. I'll show them what shame really looks like. I didn't cry that day. I didn't scream. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. But that night, when I got home, I stayed up until 2 a.m., creating folders on my computer. Names like evidence, power of attorney, and asset disputes. I began the process of learning everything they never wanted me to understand. No more waiting, no more begging. By the time I got home after the ceremony, the sky had started to dim, but the heat of the day still clung to the sidewalk. I sat in the car for a long while before going inside, the air conditioning barely whispering through the vents. My hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving, not from fear, no, that had passed, but from a heaviness I couldn't quite name. Inside my apartment, the walls greeted me with their usual hush. No congratulations banner, no leftover cake, just silence. The kind that wraps itself around your chest like it's trying to smother something inside you before it can scream. I put the manila envelope down on my kitchen table. The one with my grandfather's trust documents. I didn't open it yet. Not because I was afraid. I was just focused. Focused in a way I hadn't been since I first learned how to swallow my voice and smile anyway. I didn't sleep that night. I answered no texts. I watched the messages pile up on my phone. Callista's passive-aggressive stories on Instagram, Vera's guilt-laced paragraphs like, "This could have been avoided if you hadn't been so stubborn." But my memory wasn't short. It didn't need a reminder. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I received an email from the Dean of Students. "We're pleased to invite you to deliver the student closing remarks at the spring graduation." I read the line 3 times. I thought about how long I had waited for a moment like that, not for vanity, but because it meant someone thought my story mattered, that I wasn't invisible after all. I printed the speech that night, tucked it in a folder, placed it in my nightstand drawer like it was sacred. That same evening, I told Vera over the phone. Her response was clipped. "They're letting you speak? In front of everyone?" I hesitated before answering, trying to convince myself her tone was just surprise, not judgment. "It's only 5 minutes," I told her. "But I want to share something real, not just statistics." There was a pause. "Just make sure you don't get too personal," she said. "No one wants to hear a sob story." I said nothing. That was easier than arguing. The following week, I stopped by the campus office to confirm details. The assistant looked at me, confused. "Oh, I believe your slot was reassigned," she said, glancing awkwardly at her computer. "Something about family requesting a change? I thought you knew." I didn't say anything. I smiled politely, thanked her, then left. That night, I found the speech I'd printed in the trash bin of my mother's kitchen, torn in half. I never told her I saw it. It wasn't just about the speech. It was about the pattern. Every time I stood up for myself, someone in that family made sure I sat back down. 6 months before that, there had been the dinner. It was supposed to be a casual Sunday evening, roast chicken, potatoes, some peach cobbler Vera had picked up from the market. Everyone had gathered for what Callista called a family check-in, which really meant, let's talk about Callista's next sponsored campaign and how we can support her. I barely touched my food. I knew how these dinners went. Still, I was there. I showed up. That had to count for something. Vera placed a slice of cake in front of me. "It's lemon, your favorite." I thanked her, took a bite. 10 minutes later, I couldn't feel my hands. My limbs felt like warm jelly. My mind slowed, words tangling somewhere between thought and mouth. I looked around the table, trying to explain that something was wrong, but no one was looking. They were busy talking about Callista's new photo shoot with a company that sold $200 yoga mats. Later that evening, while helping clear the table, Vera touched my elbow and whispered, "I slipped you something light. Just to take the edge off. You were getting tense, and I couldn't risk a scene." I blinked at her. My mouth opened, then closed again. She walked away before I could speak. Now, as I sat in my apartment the day after the ceremony, those memories stacked like bricks in my chest. I opened my phone. The notifications still blinked, missed calls from Vera. A text from Callista. "We all have that one sibling who just wants attention." I deleted the message. Then I did something I hadn't dared before. I removed them both from my contacts. I didn't block them. That would have felt like asking them to stop. I didn't care to ask anymore. Later that night, unable to sleep, I drove to my storage unit. The roads were quiet, blanketed in the kind of hush that only comes after emotional devastation. I parked near Unit 43, entered the code, and pulled the door open. The metal creaked as I wheeled inside. In the back, beneath an old chest of winter coats and my grandfather's fishing gear, I found it, a locked fireproof box. I'd stored it there 3 years ago, thinking I'd never need it, but here we were. Back home, I laid the contents on the floor, the trust paperwork, copies of the original deed to the house, a medical power of attorney transfer from when my grandfather was hospitalized, financial documents, old, yellowed, but intact, and in the center of it all, his letter. I didn't read it yet, that would come later, but I placed it next to the stack of documents and pulled out a yellow highlighter. I began marking each page, one by one, section by section, not with rage, not with grief, with precision. They had taught me that silence was survival, that speaking up would only lead to punishment. But what they never realized was that I had been listening the entire time, recording, remembering, documenting, and now I was going to speak, not with screaming, not with tears, but with paperwork, with notarized signatures, with cold, clean facts. They broke my voice once, but this time I would speak in a language they couldn't erase. Law. By the time the clock hit 3:17 a.m., every page on my living room floor had a yellow mark on it. The highlighter in my hand had gone dry halfway through the guardianship affidavit, but I hadn't noticed until I tried to circle a paragraph for the second time. I replaced it with a pen and kept going. I wasn't trying to convince anyone anymore. This was about proving it to myself, that I hadn't imagined it, that every choice they made, the stolen letters, the quiet betrayals, had a paper trail, and now I had all the paper. Around sunrise, I made coffee and sat back in the recliner near the window. I hadn't slept, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. It's strange how grief doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it settles in like dust, silent, clinging to everything, and it isn't until you wipe the surface clean that you realize how long it's been there. I looked at the pinboard I'd hung up the month I moved in. Photos, old medical statements, school acceptance letters. I hadn't touched it in years, but today it felt necessary. I took a thumbtack and pressed in the top corner of a photocopy. University of Northern Colorado, full tuition award letter. I remembered the day I got that envelope like it had just happened. I'd been 18, barely out of community college, and it was the first time in my life someone had said, "We believe in you," and backed it up with something real. I put that letter on the fridge, proud. I didn't post it on social media. I didn't throw a party. I just smiled every time I opened the door and saw it. The next morning, it was gone. When I asked Vera, she shrugged. Maybe it fell. But I knew how she said that word, maybe, like it was meant to erase things. I searched the kitchen, the trash, even the mail pile. It was nowhere. Weeks passed. I waited for more details from the school. Nothing came. Finally, I called. "We never received a confirmation from your side," the administrator told me gently. After the deadline, we had to offer the award to the next candidate. I didn't argue. I didn't tell them the letter had vanished. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew my mother had intercepted it. I pinned the copy to the board and moved to the next document. Daniel. That name still made something in my chest flicker. Not pain, not anymore. More like absence, like opening a drawer you forgot was empty. Daniel and I met during a disability awareness volunteer event. He was kind, observant. He never spoke over me, Never tried to fix me. He just showed up, every time, until he didn't. We dated almost a year. He'd talked about moving with me after graduation. We'd picked out a place to visit that summer, Flagstaff. I'd never seen the Grand Canyon. He said, "You need to see something that big. It'll make you realize you already survived the hardest part." And then, one day, he pulled away. No big fight, no final blow-up, just quiet, distance, silence. I thought it was me. Maybe I'd asked too much, been too intense. Maybe the chair became too real. It wasn't until 3 years later that I got the message. "Know me? I've thought about writing this for a while. Your dad called me back then, said things, scared me, said you wouldn't be able to have kids, that you'd need care your whole life, said I'd ruin mine trying to take care of you. I'm sorry I listened. I wish I hadn't." I never replied. What was there to say? I pulled out the printout and tacked it next to the scholarship letter. Next came the hospital record. It was easy to find. I kept a copy after the incident, not because I wanted to, but because the lawyer I saw briefly afterward said, "Keep everything. Always." I was 19. Winter had come in harsh that year. I slipped down our icy porch stairs and landed wrong on my arm. The pain made my teeth buzz. Vera wasn't home. Callista was off at some retreat for her new sisterhood brand. I called 911 myself. At the ER, the nurse asked for my insurance card. I gave her the one I'd always used. She typed it in, then frowned. "This was deactivated a while ago." I blinked. "What?" "You're not listed anymore," she said. "It was revoked 2 years ago." It turned out Vera had removed me from the family plan when I turned 17. Quietly. Without telling me. I didn't get angry right away. I was too confused, too shaken. When I confronted her later, she didn't even look ashamed. "Do you know how much premiums cost?" she said. "You were stable. Callista needed skin treatments. It made more sense." Made more sense. That phrase echoed as I pinned the insurance denial to the center of the board. College, love, health. 3 things people fight for. Build on. 3 parts of life you're supposed to grow into with time. And all of them, in my life, had one thing in common. They were taken from me, not by fate, not by chance, but by the people who claimed to love me. My fingers trembled a little as I stepped back. Not from rage, not from pain, from clarity. That was the day I stopped calling them wounds. They were blueprints. They weren't accidents. They were plans. I sat back down and pulled the letter from my grandfather out of its envelope. I hadn't read it in full since the night he gave it to me, months before he passed. "If you're holding this, then something finally pushed you past the edge. I always hoped they'd come around. I see now that they won't. You have my words and my proof. Use them." I exhaled, long and slow. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside my laptop. Then I opened a new folder titled Cage Break. One by one, I uploaded scans of everything on the board. I made backups, sent copies to Lark, my old roommate turned attorney, scheduled a call. My plan was never revenge. It was escape. It had been 3 days since I printed and scanned the last file. Most of my folders were backed up 3 times, one on a physical drive, one in the cloud, and one I kept encrypted on a secure USB in the bottom of my shoe closet. I was that deliberate now, that paranoid, that careful. The silence after sorting through it all felt manufactured. Like something inside me had gone quiet only so I could hear what they'd been saying all along. Not in words, but in the way they moved, decided, and erased. 3 months before the ceremony, before all the paperwork, before the public disgrace, something happened that never quite left my mind. I was at the pharmacy, waiting on a refill for a muscle relaxant I only used on bad flare-up days. While I waited, I picked up a Wichita Daily Journal someone had left on the plastic waiting room chair beside me. That day's cover featured a local family praised for raising awareness in the disability space. The headline read, "Sister shares sibling's journey to inspire change." The photo, God help me, was me. It was a picture from a community park event I'd attended 6 months earlier. I'd spent that day volunteering, helping kids who had recently lost mobility due to injury or illness. At one point, I'd helped a girl, maybe 11, get from the field to the refreshment tent in her new wheelchair. Someone must have snapped a photo. But in the version on the front page, my face was cropped out, the full quote under the image. Progress isn't about pity, it's about presence. Callista Datch. I nearly dropped the magazine. That quote was mine. I'd said it on a panel during a campus discussion a year earlier. I remembered it clearly because I'd written it down in a personal journal Callista had skimmed one day while I was cooking. I took the paper home and pinned it to my wall. I didn't say anything at the time, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to understand just how deep the performance ran. I had no idea that would only be the start. A week later, Vera called. "We want to do something special for your birthday," she said, sweetly. "Just a small family dinner. You've been working hard." She offered to host it at the community hall behind their church. "It's accessible," she added. We made sure of that. For a moment, I let myself believe it might actually be just dinner. Quiet, private, maybe even healing. The day of, I dressed modestly. Navy dress, again, not the same one as the ceremony, but similar, familiar. I arrived at the hall at 5:45 p.m. right on time. What greeted me when the doors opened was surreal. Balloons, streamers, a printed banner that read, "Raising Hope, Supporting Local Disability Heroes." There were pamphlets stacked on a welcome table with my photo, taken from an old Facebook post, next to a QR code that read, "Donate now, make a difference." There was a microphone stand near the buffet, folding chairs arranged like an audience setup, people I didn't know, vendors from local businesses, a videographer. I froze in the doorway. Callista spotted me first. "There she is," she called out in her well-trained influencer voice. She waved, then whispered something to a woman standing beside her, who nodded and handed her a check. I wheeled myself inside slowly, scanning the room. Not once did anyone greet me like it was my birthday. No candles, no cake, no happy birthday. Nomi wasn't the guest of honor, she was the mascot. Every 10 minutes, Vera or Callista would nudge a guest my way. "This is who inspired all of this," they'd say. "Her story is why we started this initiative." I wasn't allowed to speak. Every time I stepped toward the mic, Callista would step in, brush her hair behind her ear, and start another speech. "We just want people to see the beauty and resilience," she said once, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder like I was a statue. I clenched my fists under the table. I left early, told them I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. When I got home, I checked the fundraising page listed on the pamphlet. Over $12,000 raised. The bank account listed under recipient belonged to a registered LLC, C. Datch Creative Services. I took screenshots, saved copies of everything, printed what I could. 3 days later, I got a direct message on social media from a woman I didn't know. "You're so brave, letting your sister share your journey like that. You're lucky to have someone so devoted to telling your story." I didn't respond, but I clicked the profile. She had shared a link to one of Callista's talks, another staged event with folding chairs and mason jar candles. I listened to the speech. At the 3-minute mark, Callista told a story that mirrored one I had written in a private group chat, how I used to count sidewalk cracks as a child to distract from pain during long walks. She even used the line I had written once. "Some days, I only got through the pain by giving it a rhythm." I stared at the screen. She didn't just steal images. She stole my rhythm. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and I opened my laptop. If they wanted to turn me into a brand, I'd become a corporation. If they wanted to write me into their script, I'd take the pen. If they insisted I smile for the cameras, I'd smile, with documentation. I began downloading every document tied to my name. I checked county records, LLC filings, property histories, every initiative they launched in my honor. I flagged addresses, names, payment processors. I looked into campaign IDs, tax numbers, donor disclosures. They left so many breadcrumbs. By sunrise, I had a folder with 113 files. I named it Narrative Control. Then I made coffee, added 2 sugars, and sat back in my chair. They turned me into their narrative. Now, I was writing the ending, and this time, I wouldn't be the one cropped out. After organizing my digital evidence and naming every folder with precision, I gave myself 24 hours of silence. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to observe. I wanted to see how long it would take them to say something, anything, that might sound remotely like accountability. Of course, they didn't. Instead, the next sound I heard from them came from someone else entirely. It was a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks before the ceremony. I was making oatmeal in my kitchen when my phone buzzed with a new email notification. The sender line read, Community Forward Foundation. I almost deleted it. I thought it was one of those newsletters nonprofits send after you've donated once and they never let you go. But then, I saw the subject line. Thank you for sharing your image. Together, we raised over $9,000. I blinked. I opened the email. Hi, Nomi. Thank you again for allowing us to use your image for the Support Noemi's Mobility campaign. The funds raised are helping cover essentials for local families impacted by mobility challenges. We're grateful to be working alongside such an inspiring story. The check was sent to the Datch Family Management account as instructed. Congratulations! I sat down, spoon in hand, oatmeal forgotten. I didn't remember approving any image use. I never consented to a campaign. My heart thudded, not in fear, but in disbelief. I clicked on the campaign link they included. There it was. A photo of me smiling, taken at that same event from the article, only this time uncropped. The campaign was titled Support Noemi's Mobility. Beneath the title, a blurb read, Born into challenges but never defeated, Noemi's resilience has touched our hearts. Now her family is building something beautiful in her honor. Help us keep moving forward, together. The donations were active. People had commented. Some had written things like, You're an inspiration. Others said, I hope this helps with her new chair or physical therapy. I stared at the contributor list, then scrolled to the bottom. Recipient, C. Datch Holdings, LLC, Subaccount, Family Fund Management, Bank, Midfield Credit Union. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. I wasn't shocked anymore, just done. I drafted an email immediately. To whom it may concern, I never authorized the use of my image or my name in any public campaign. I am requesting immediate removal of the campaign, return of all funds, and formal retraction. Nomi Rilke. I sent it and waited. No reply that day, none the next. On the 3rd, I received a response that said, We understand your concerns. The campaign was submitted by a verified family representative. Please resolve this matter within your household directly. Household, I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. That same evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. Callista's voice filled the air as I played it on speaker. Hey, I know you're probably mad, but we're trying to help people. You're being really unfair. We never claimed anything false. We're just sharing your story so others can feel less alone. You should be thanking us. I didn't save the voicemail. I didn't delete it either. I just played it once more, this time so I could memorize every word. The next day, a new podcast episode dropped. Callista's Couch, Episode 57, Family Lessons. I wasn't surprised. I listened. My sister's journey is, well, complicated. It's beautiful when people overcome, but not everyone is strong. Some just need help forever, and that's okay too. We can love them, even if they don't always love us back. I paused the episode. That's when I saw the comments. You're such a good sister. She's lucky to have you. This made me cry. Thank you for being honest. The hashtags she used. Hashtag Nomi Strong. Hash Silent Strength. Hashtag her story not mine. I had become her brand. I screenshot the entire comment thread, copied the episode transcript, downloaded the audio. Then I picked up the phone and called Vera. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Tell Callista to take the episode down, I said calmly. There was a pause. Then a light laugh. Sweetheart, you're being dramatic again. She's doing you a favor. More people know about you now. That's a good thing. She's building a brand on top of my trauma. Vera didn't respond immediately. I could hear her breathing, steady as ever. You need to learn to accept help when it's given, she said finally. Why do you always have to fight everyone who's trying to help you? Because no one's helping me, I said. You're helping yourselves. She's not my advocate, she's my puppeteer, and I've cut the strings. Know me, we're family, we share everything. Then you'll understand why I'm sharing a cease and desist next. I hung up. That night, I stayed up filing takedown requests to every platform that hosted her content. I cited unauthorized use of likeness, false representation, misappropriation of image, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The language wasn't mine. I pulled it from a legal template Lark had once sent me, just in case. Around 1:00 a.m., I made a list of financial institutions and digital services I'd had any past connection with. I wrote emails explaining how my name and story were being used without consent. I attached screenshots, filings, call logs. I wasn't expecting miracles. I just wanted a trail. As I finished the last message, I leaned back in my chair and whispered into the stillness of my apartment. They mistook my silence for permission. This was their first and only warning. The day the foreclosure finalized, I sat on the floor of my apartment with my laptop balanced across my knees. The apartment was quiet, except for the rhythmic hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak from the building settling into itself. My inbox pinged with a notification from Lark, the subject line short and satisfying. Confirmed. It's yours. I clicked the email open, and there it was. Legal documentation showing that the house on Sycamore Street, the one I had grown up in, was no longer theirs. It was mine. I didn't smile. There was no glee, no fist pump, just a long exhale as if my lungs were releasing something they'd been holding onto for too many years, something stale and heavy. 2 weeks earlier, while I was building my digital evidence board and watching Callista turn my life into a highlight reel, I had gone through the county property records out of curiosity. What I found made me sit upright. Unpaid taxes on the house, nearing foreclosure. 3 notices ignored. 1 final auction scheduled. They were so busy selling my story, they forgot to secure their foundation. I forwarded the documents to Lark, who immediately said, "We can buy this out from under them, but not in your name, not directly." She explained the mechanics of a proxy buyer, Shell LLC, blind bidding. I let her handle that. All I needed was the outcome, and now I had it. Still seated, I reached for the drawer under my coffee table and pulled out the pale yellow envelope that held my grandfather's original estate letter, the one I'd already had verified against the will submitted to probate after his death. The letter, written in his familiar cursive, outlined that I would receive the full balance of his retirement investments and trust, citing care and presence during his final years. But the document filed by Gideon, weeks after the funeral, painted a different picture. My name barely mentioned, assets redirected to Vera and Callista in alignment with family priorities. It took 3 calls, 1 pro bono handwriting analyst, and 5 days to confirm. The signatures didn't match. The will had been altered. Forge wasn't just a metaphor, it was literal. I printed the analysis and tucked it behind the property deed. The next morning, I drove to the county office and signed a motion to freeze the distribution of the remaining estate. Lark handled the filings. Within 72 hours, Vera and Gideon were legally blocked from accessing what they'd been living off of for years. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. The following weekend, Vera and Gideon went on one of their regular spa trips outside of town. I knew the routine well. They'd been booking those weekends every other month like clockwork, usually to recharge and unplug, or as Vera used to say in her condescending way, "We all need to escape responsibility sometimes, Nomi." This time, while they were pampering themselves with eucalyptus wraps and cucumber water, I had the locks changed, I had the utilities redirected, I had the mailbox rerouted. I even updated the address on file with their credit card providers, because technically, that house was now leased to a third party. I was that third party. When Sunday afternoon came, I parked across the street in a borrowed sedan. I sat low, the windows tinted, the AC running as the temperature outside crept into the mid-90s. At exactly 3:08 p.m., their silver Buick pulled into the driveway. I watched as Gideon stepped out first, dressed in white linen like he thought he was somebody's idea of a man in control. Vera followed, oversized sunglasses shielding whatever guilt she might have worn. They tried the front door. Nothing. I watched as they exchanged glances, confusion, then irritation. Gideon pulled his phone from his pocket and tried to call someone. I didn't answer. When Vera walked around to the side entrance, she gasped. The keypad was gone. A new lock installed. The door wouldn't budge. I opened the car door and stepped out slowly, not to intimidate, just to be seen. Gideon's eyes met mine first. He started walking toward me fast, the kind of stomp he used when I was a child, and he wanted to scare me into silence. I didn't move. "You think this is funny?" he barked. "You changed the locks on my house?" "No," I said. "I changed the locks on my house." Vera approached now, voice shrill. "You're out of your mind. This is illegal, Nomi. You can't just steal someone's home." "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly, pulling out the manila folder from under my arm. "You lost it. It was foreclosed. You missed the tax payments. I bought it, legally, through the auction you never thought I'd find." Gideon reached for the folder. I stepped back. "Don't," he sneered. "You're a coward, hiding behind paperwork." I flipped open the folder and handed him the top page. "Deed, purchase receipt, legal transfer. If you want to challenge it, go ahead, but I promise you, you'll lose." Vera shook her head like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Why would you do this to us?" "You did this to yourselves," I replied. "You spent years erasing me. Now I've returned the favor, except I used law instead of lies." He growled. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said, and this time I let a faint smile touch my lips. "It just means I finally stopped pretending you ever were." They both stood there, sweating in their expensive outfits, stunned and silent. I turned and walked back to the car. I didn't look back until I opened the door. Then I said one last thing. "You might want to stop trying those keys. You're trespassing now." The house remained dark for 3 days. I didn't go back to look. I didn't need to. My phone lit up with notifications the moment Vera and Gideon tried to challenge the title change, first through voicemail, then through the county office, and then, predictably, through a half-baked complaint filed by Gideon accusing me of fraudulent manipulation of a trust. The word manipulation hit differently coming from him. Lark called me around 10 a.m. the next morning. I had just sat down with a piece of toast and was scrolling through emails when her name popped up. "You're not going to like this," she said, "but you're going to want to see it." "Send it," I said, already pulling open my laptop. 2 minutes later, I was staring at a scanned PDF of a withdrawal form from Midfield Credit Union. It was dated 11 days before my grandfather passed away. The account number. It matched the small retirement savings fund he'd opened when I was 16. He called it a just-in-case fund. He never told Vera or Gideon about it. He gave me a slip once, said, "If something happens to me, this is yours." I'm not sure anyone else would protect it. And yet, the document showed the account had been drained. Completely. The signature. Not his. Vera's name appeared on the line for power of attorney. "Check the timestamp," Lark said. I looked again. The signature was notarized the day he was sedated in the hospital, hooked up to morphine, unable to hold a pen, let alone sign anything. My hand tightened around the mouse. "They forged it." "They did," she replied. "Does the bank know?" "They do now." I didn't speak for a while. I just stared at the screen as the realization bloomed and curdled in my chest. They didn't just want my silence, they wanted to ensure I never had the means to fight back. That afternoon, I drove across town to the health clinic for a scheduled appointment. The previous week had taken more out of me than I'd admitted, and my body had been flaring up again. Tight joints, the kind of fatigue that felt like concrete in my bloodstream. Halfway through the appointment, the doctor advised a short overnight observation just to be safe. I agreed. But when we reached the front desk to update my file, the nurse paused, fingers frozen on her keyboard. Miss Rilke? She said hesitantly. I'm having trouble locating your guardianship designation. I blinked. I don't have a guardian. I'm 30 years old. She squinted at the screen. There's a note on your file stating that legal responsibility has been waived by next of kin. It's quite direct. I stepped forward. Let me see it. She turned the monitor slightly. In bold at the bottom of the screen, a scanned document sat embedded in the file. The statement read, I, Vera Datch, am no longer legally responsible for this adult. She is not under our care, and I am not to be contacted as her guardian in any future medical matter. No relation. The box marked Family Contact was unchecked. My pulse didn't race. My breath didn't catch. It was worse than that. I went still, cold, like something inside had slipped out through my shoes and leaked onto the tile floor. The nurse, clearly uncomfortable, said, Would you like to designate a new contact? No, I said. I think that line's been erased already. Back home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat in silence for over an hour. I replayed that phrase, no relation, over and over in my head. What kind of mother preemptively cuts herself off from medical accountability? What kind of father stands by and lets it happen? Then again, I'd stopped asking those questions a while ago. The next morning, Gideon left me a voicemail. It arrived at 6:47 a.m., the hour he used to wake me as a child by knocking twice on the wall instead of saying my name. You think you've won? You think taking a house and a few papers makes you better than us? It doesn't. You're still nothing. You'll always be nothing. Just a stain on the Datch name. You'll never be more than that. He didn't hang up immediately. The message ended with the sound of a breath. Heavy. Measured. Then silence. I played it once. Then I hit delete. That same afternoon, Lark and I submitted final documentation to the county clerk's office. Official verification of the forged estate documents, bank statement discrepancies, and medical guardianship abuse. It didn't take long. By the end of the week, Vera and Gideon were permanently removed from all access to the retirement accounts once tied to my grandfather. Any requests they made for financial relief, pensions, housing credits, even healthcare stipends were blocked or rerouted through legal supervision. They weren't just locked out of the house. They were locked out of my name, out of the trust, out of the narrative. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post a cryptic quote on Instagram like Callista would have. I sat on my balcony and listened to the distant sounds of summer, the faint bass of a neighbor's music, someone dragging a trash can to the curb, the occasional bark of a dog. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of stillness, not peace, but possibility. They had tried to erase me from their story, but they didn't know. I'd already written my own chapter, and this time, I held the pen. The morning after Lark filed the last affidavit with the clerk's office, I received an email from an address I hadn't seen in years. The subject line was short, with no punctuation, funeral service for Gideon. The sender was Vera. I stared at it, unread, for nearly a minute. Then I clicked. Know me, your father passed late last night. The service is scheduled for Tuesday at noon. I assume you'll be decent enough to attend. V. There was no, I hope you're doing okay. No mention of the decades we shared under one roof. Not even a lie to soften the message, just a command, neatly veiled as expectation. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove across town to the retirement center where my grandfather's old neighbor, Harold, now lived. The last time I'd seen him, I was 19 and helping him repair his mailbox. He'd been kind, quiet, and always treated me like a person, not a burden. He remembered me immediately when I showed up. I figured you might come by eventually, he said. I've got something I kept for too long. He pulled a shoebox from under his bed. Inside was an old DVD labeled in permanent marker. Backyard BBQ, June 2011. I never meant to keep this from you, Harold added. But after your granddad passed, I wasn't sure what to do with it. I couldn't throw it away. Felt like someone needed to know. I thanked him, took the DVD, and left. Back at home, I borrowed an external player from a friend and popped it in. The footage was unremarkable at first. People laughing, children running, paper plates and soda cans scattered across picnic tables. Then came the moment that punched the air out of my lungs. Gideon and Vera stood near the grill. A friend of theirs was recording casually. "I don't know why we ever had a third," Gideon chuckled, turning a hot dog over. "We had Callista. That was enough. The last one. Total dead weight. We should have stopped while we were ahead." Vera didn't correct him. She didn't flinch. She laughed. The same laugh she gave the night he kicked my wheelchair. The same one I'd heard after every one of his worst moments. Complicit. Not broken. I watched it once, then again. Then I closed the laptop and packed the disc back into the envelope. Tuesday came quickly. I wore gray, not black. Black felt dishonest. I arrived at the chapel early, parking at the edge of the lot, close enough to see, far enough to breathe. Inside, the front row was already filled. Vera in a pearl suit, Callista next to her in her usual carefully curated perfection. The crowd was small, no community mourners, just family and obligation. Callista took the podium first. "Dad was a strong man," she began. "He believed in order, in hard work. He held us to high standards because he loved us." I kept my gaze steady, watching her hands grip the sides of the lectern. Her voice didn't crack once. She didn't mention me. When she finished, a murmur passed through the room. Then Vera stood. "I have something my husband wanted me to read," she announced. She pulled out a folded sheet of paper, dramatically smoothing the creases. "To my family, I wasn't perfect, but I tried. Some people carry gratitude, others carry resentment. I hope they eventually understand that discipline is love. I forgive you, Noemi." My mouth went dry. "I forgive you." My heels clicked as I stood and made my way to the front. The room grew quiet. I stopped a foot from Vera. "Funny," I said gently. "Because I have a letter too." I reached into my coat and pulled out a smaller envelope, aged, sealed, notarized. I opened it carefully. "My grandfather wrote this," I began. "It was meant for me. He asked me to read it when the moment felt right." I cleared my throat. "If you're reading this, Nomi, it means they tried to silence you again. Let me be clear. You owe them nothing. You were there for me when no one else was. You showed up when they couldn't be bothered to call. You've always been the bravest one. Don't let them rewrite who you are." I looked up. No one moved. Someone in the second row raised a phone and started recording. I didn't care. I folded the letter and slid it back into my coat. Then I turned and walked down the aisle, past the stunned faces and stiff silence. Outside, Lark waited in her car. I slid into the passenger seat and exhaled. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't have to. I looked out the window. The sky was overcast, but the air felt easier to breathe. For the first time in weeks, I smiled, not because I won, but because I was done. By the time spring turned to summer, the house on Sycamore no longer felt like the one I grew up in. The creak in the hallway floor still sang under pressure, and the dent on the stairwell remained from where Gideon once slammed a box during a Sunday rage. But something had changed. Maybe it was the furniture, maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was me. 6 months had passed since the funeral, since the letter. And since I stood in front of a crowd that had never seen me whole and told the truth without raising my voice, the day after that service, I slept for 12 hours straight. Then I woke up and made a list. A year ago, I'd written down everything I wanted to escape. Now, I made a new list, what I wanted to build. It began with a name, the Rilke Foundation for Silent Survivors. A mouthful maybe, but it felt right. It sounded like something rooted, something permanent. I spent the next 4 months transforming the house, room by room, memory by memory. The front bedroom, which used to be Callista's, became a counseling office. I kept the walls pale blue, but added soft lighting, a bookshelf filled with stories that didn't sugarcoat trauma, and a wooden desk from a thrift store that I refinished by hand. The guest room turned into a quiet space for journaling and grief work. No screens allowed, just chairs, blankets, and a shelf of empty notebooks waiting to be filled. The dining room, once where we argued over who embarrassed whom, was now a shared space for legal literacy classes. Once a week, a retired paralegal named Rhonda came in to explain tenants' rights, guardianship clauses, and how to open a bank account no one else could touch. We called it paperwork armor. On the mantel above the fireplace, I didn't hang a family photo. I placed a framed printout of the newspaper article that ran in the Wichita Record 2 weeks after we opened. The headline read, "House of Hurt Becomes Haven." The reporter, a young woman named Lana, had interviewed me under a condition of anonymity. She ended the article with a sentence that made me cry in the quietest way. Justice is sometimes the choice to heal louder than you were hurt. The first person to walk through our doors was a 19-year-old named Evan, kicked out after telling his parents he didn't want to go into the family business. The second was a woman in her early 30s whose brother forged her name onto loan documents and vanished. The third was a girl named Iris. She came in on a Tuesday morning while I was brewing tea and reviewing building permit forms for a ramp extension in the backyard. Her hair was messy. Her face was pale. "Is this where people go when no one else wants them?" she asked. I looked up from my papers. "No," I said. "This is where people go when they realize they don't have to be wanted to be worthy." She nodded. I made her a cup of chamomile and led her to the front room. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat in my office, once my parents' master bedroom, and opened the audio file I had saved from my grandfather. He'd recorded it before his handwriting got shaky. The file was stored on a small USB I kept in the drawer with my favorite pen. "Know me?" His voice crackled. "If you're hearing this, then they tried. I knew they would. But you were never theirs. You were always your own. And I was proud of every quiet no one saw, every moment you showed up when they didn't. You are more than this family. You are your own story." I let it play once. Then I clicked save and tucked the drive back where it belonged. The next morning, I checked my inbox. One unread message from Vera. "You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy." No greeting, no name. No punctuation at the end, just those words. I didn't reply, but I did hit print. Then I slid the paper into a file marked "Proof that surviving was enough." Callista never wrote, never called. Her social media had gone dark after the funeral video circulated. One by one, her sponsors had faded. The Callista's Couch podcast went silent. The merch link expired. Some people said it was cancel culture. Others said it was consequence. I said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. Sometimes the last word isn't spoken. Sometimes it's lived. That Friday evening, I watered the potted fern by the kitchen window, fed the rescue cat we'd taken in named Morse, and settled on the front porch as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. I sipped my tea and watched as Iris sat on the swing, headphones on, scribbling in her journal. This house was no longer a prison of memory. It was a living thing, a place for rebuilding, for witnessing. I didn't get my family back. I didn't get the apology, but I got something better. I got the last word, and I gave it to someone who needed it more than me. Sometimes the greatest form of justice isn't revenge, it's choosing to build something better from what was meant to break you. Nomi didn't get an apology. She didn't get her family back. But she created a space for others like her to find safety, dignity, and peace. What would you do if your family turned their back on you and still expected your silence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that stay with you long after they're told.